Hi, I'm Brandon with Gana Trucking and Excavating. Today we're going to talk shortly about load securement, specifically load securement that we have to deal with here on a daily basis. Load securement is always specific to what you're hauling and what type of equipment you're operating. So the load securement that we're going to go over, let's say our lowboys or flatbeds, is going to be markedly different than the load securement we're going to have to go over with our side dump, truck and pup, and straight truck, dump truck drivers. When it comes to securing material, and when I'm saying material, I'm talking our aggregate, dirt, stone, sand, rubble, things like that. It's pretty simple. Luckily, the vast majority of our side dumps and dump trucks and truck and pup all have automatic tarps, so it's a really simple process. The rules are anything that is above the rim of your truck or trailer and is smaller than 2 inches, any one piece smaller than 2 inches, so that's your sands, that's a lot of your crushed aggregate, things like that, it has to be tarped under every set of circumstances, okay? That doesn't matter if it's going to spill or not. If you can see it from the ground and it is smaller than 2 inches, it legally has to be tarped. If it's not, chances are it is going to spill out. Certainly if it doesn't, a state patrolman or a law enforcement officer sees you drive by with it untarped, they're going to pull you over and they're going to give you a citation for unsecured cargo. Good rule of thumb is if it's smaller than 2 inches, so any aggregate, this is limestone here we have a container of, that smaller than 2 inches, obviously there's quite a few pieces that are significantly smaller than 2 inches. If you're hauling material like that, just take a few steps back from your truck or trailer, and if you can see it from the ground, it has to be tarped. That's a good rule of thumb to follow. Now, beyond that, it doesn't matter if you're hauling, say, for example, sand or something like that, something really, really fine. It can be below the rim of the truck or trailer. Good wind is still going to whip that out of there, okay? So in those instances, you need to tarp it as well. There is some gray area to this. We do haul a lot of rubble from time to time. If we're doing a demolition or something like that, well, we'll get large chunks of concrete with pieces of rebar sticking up through it, okay? Sometimes it is not practical to tarp in those instances, okay? Because if you roll that tarp over, that rebar sticking up is going to puncture holes in it and it's going to damage the tarp. But that only matters when there's no chance of it spilling over the sides and what you're hauling is smaller than 2 inches, okay? Good practice is just to tarp whenever you can, okay? Even if it's not above the rim. I mentioned the sand earlier, that little wind will whisk that right out of the barrel of your trailer. Aggregate like this, again, it's going to be more difficult for wind going down the road to move that, but it's an automatic tarp 9 times out of 10, so it makes just sense to tarp it regardless of if it's above or below the rim whenever you can, and that way it's something you don't have to worry about at all, okay? Now there is one thing that we kind of got to look out for here too. When you're getting loaded or unloaded, sometimes some of the material you're hauling falls and lays on like the frame of your trailer or things like that. That's why it's always good once you've been loaded or unloaded, do a quick walk around of your truck. We're going to go take a look at the side dump here as soon as we can, and I'll kind of give you a better example. But if, let's say you are hauling this type of aggregate and some of it falls on the bumper or the frame of your side dump, an officer does have at his discretion to call that, you know, it's a little pile like this, an unsecured load, and write you a citation for it. That is totally at the officer's discretion. We have certainly seen it here. Regardless of that, this debris, once you start going down the road, it's not going to make it very far before it comes off and chips somebody's windshield or something like that. So it's very good practice. Every time you load, every time you unload, just do a walk around of your equipment and brush off any debris that has fallen outside of the barrel of the trailer and is resting on your truck or trailer. We have a loaded side dump here. Wayne's side dump actually is actually loaded with sand, but we're going to use it to demonstrate a couple things. Wayne did the exact right thing when we found him. Everything's tarped. I don't believe it's even above the rim, but he's been around enough to know that sand will find a way to work itself out. Just an example of something we talked about inside. A lot of times when you get loaded, we don't see any here with the sand, but we just threw some rocks out as kind of a demonstration. Material will fall exactly like here, different parts of the frame, on the back bumper, wherever it may be. That's not uncommon. That's nothing operators can can account for sometimes, just a small amount of debris, but this is what we're talking about. And a state patrolman, again, I've seen it, we've all seen it, they can pull you over and they'll point to this. If this is what you're hauling, they're gonna call this part of the cargo. And it's just free out here, and that's gonna be a unsecured cargo citation. So the simplest way to avoid all that, once you get loaded or unloaded, do your walk around, and just do one of those, and the whole problem is solved, okay? One thing I also want to point out to you on these, especially these side dumps, on these side dumps with the tarping system, we have the automatic tarps on them. Right now, that tarp is, I guess I'll call it unloaded. There's a massive spring inside those tarp arms, okay? And when the tarp is over, the spring doesn't have any tension on it, okay? When that tarp is rolled back and the trailer is open, that spring inside that tarp is cocked back, and there is a crazy amount of energy stored in that spring. So if you have a mechanical issue where your tarp is broken, it won't untarp or roll out or anything like that, don't try to fiddle it with yourself. Get with the shop right away on that, because they'll need to secure that down before we can do any work on it. There is an unreasonable amount of energy stored in one of those things. If you go working on it, trying to fix the problem without really knowing what you're doing, or without having that thing locked out and secured down, you do something wrong, all that tension is going to be released in one moment, and that energy is just going to fling that tarp open, okay? And it's going to go through anything in its way. There's no person who's going to be able to hold it down. You won't have time to hold it down. So don't fiddle with those things yourselves. That's what we have the shop for. Now we're going to talk about securing heavy equipment. Something that doesn't affect every driver here, but it does affect a lot of people, and it's something we do every single day. To help us out, I'm going to have Mike Denterger go over some of it. He manages the lowboy operation.
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, always have 4 points of contact for your chains and binders on any equipment. You know the accurate weight and height and width of all your equipment when you load it. A couple things that are often overlooked is operators oftentimes like to help load and unload equipment, which is awesome, but ultimately it's your responsibility when you're going down the road for that piece of equipment on your trailer. So I always made sure when I was running a lowboy my hand was the last hand on the binder, make sure it's secured how you want it to be secured in a legal fashion. So that's always check over your equipment as you do it. Any slight bends or stretches basically needs to get addressed right away, because they can break going down the road, run over bumps and humps. Other slight tips is always pull the binder towards you, because sometimes the chains have a little twist or whatever and they'll snap. If you're pushing down towards the trailer, it'll bust your knuckles up pretty good.
Okay, here we are with a couple pieces of equipment on one of our lowboys, so we can get a little more detail, a little hands-on of what we're talking about when we're talking about securing the heavy equipment. There's two types of securement tie-downs you can use. The first one is called a direct tie-down. That's where you go from the trailer securement point directly to the piece of equipment and no further than that, okay? And the other one we'll get to in a second is called a indirect tie-down, and I'll show you what that is on the other end of this equipment here. We said earlier, the working load limit of your straps or chains or your tie-down securement devices have to equal 50% of what the equipment weighs. So for the purposes of this, we are going to presume that this weighs 50,000 pounds. It does not, but I want to use a nice round number. When you use a direct tie-down like this from the trailer directly up to the machine and no further, you get to count 50% of the weight limit of this chain, okay? So let's say that these chains are 20,000 pounds, again, so we can use round numbers here. This has a working weight limit of 20,000 pounds, and you use a direct securement, right from the trailer to the machine. This only counts for 10,000 pounds towards what you're going to use in your total securement. Okay, so if we head down here now, we're going to go to this. Now this is called your indirect securement. It starts on one end of the trailer, goes over or through the piece of equipment, and goes to the other end. That's called indirect, okay? Where it touches the trailer at 2 points, essentially. Your chain is touching the trailer at 2 points on each side. When you use this, you get to count 100% of the weight limit of the chain. So again, if this is a 20,000 pound chain, you get to count 100% of it. So this goes 20,000 pounds towards all of the combination of the chain weight limits to get to that 50% of the weight of the equipment, okay? So I'm kind of going in circles here. Again, for the purposes of this, we said this skid loader weighs 50,000 pounds. So all of our chains weight limits have to add up to 25,000 pounds. So on that direct tie down over there, we get to count 10,000 pounds for each one. There's one on the driver's side, there's one on the passenger side. That gets you 20,000 pounds. And if we were to use this back one here, that's going to get you another 20,000 pounds just by that chain alone, because it's the indirect tie down where you're going to count 100%. So that's going to get you to that actually gets you to 40,000 pounds, presuming those are 20,000 pound chains, again with round numbers here. So that's how that works, okay? One thing too, when you're hauling anything with a bucket or a boom, like your loaders have their buckets, your track hose, mini hose have their booms, you got to throw a chain over the bucket or over the boom. That's to stop the lateral movement of the boom if something were to happen, and just a little more securement point on the moving pieces. The reason they say that is because these can move in the event of an accident, obviously up and down. It's not too big of a deal, but just to stop any movement at all is the key here, any first movement. So they always say throw a chain over the bucket and be done. Another thing you always have to consider, and remember, you have to secure the equipment down at minimum of 4 points. So we have 1 point back here, we have another point back there, and then we have 1 point at the front, and that chain actually goes across and through the securement points of the skid loader to the other side. That gets us our 4 points of securement. Minimum 4 points. Some of the bigger equipment we're going to have to go more, okay? Another thing we need to point out too is when you're securing down to the trailer of where you're putting the chain or the strap on the trailer, it needs to be a securement point that's designed and that's not going to allow the chain or strap to slide around. Like this, where they came through with the hook here, all the weight is being pulled this direction. So if it's going to slide, it's going to come back like that. So they put it up against this piece of steel right here so it cannot slide forward the way that the weight's pulling it. And this one back here, they did the opposite way. The chain's going like that, so all the weight is being pulled that direction. And they put it up against this steel plate here so that if there is, it can't slide the way it wants to, okay? That's another good point. You have to be very aware of where you're strapping down to the trailer, okay? You're gonna have a 50,000 pound chain. If what you're strapping it down to the trailer on can only hold 5,000 pounds, the weight limit of that chain is worthless, because it always goes at the lowest denominator. That saying, a chain is only as good as its weakest link, is very accurate, okay? The lightest thing, whether it be the securement point on the trailer, the chain itself, the binder, or the securement point on the piece of equipment, whatever has the weakest part of it, the lowest weight limit, is what's going to break. So you got to make sure every part of that trailer, binder, chain, equipment where you're securing to can hold the strength, has the hold strength that it's going to need. Okay, another thing we got to talk about here are what's called headache racks. Okay, these are on most of our trucks that haul heavy equipment, obviously. They're on a few of our side dumps as well. They're not just limited to CDL trucks. They can be on pickups and things like that that cover the back window, okay? What a headache rack is essentially, this one's aluminum, it's just a plate that is placed between the cab and the driver and any freight you're hauling, okay? We're gonna put some visuals up on on the presentation here to kind of show you why you need them. But that's meant in case you do have a failure with your load securement. If you're hauling pipe, post, or heavy equipment, you have to abruptly stop and something does come forward. This is going to protect everything in here, which is the driver, the most important part, okay? This is just another layer of protection so that it doesn't hit the cab and go right through the cab, injuring or killing the driver, okay? You see this a lot actually when you're hauling post or tubing or pipe or anything like that. Anything that's stacked like that and there's only downward pressure on it. If you get on the brakes too hard or in a catastrophic event, a post or a pipe can come forward, and without this here, it's going to go right through this fiberglass cap. And it's going to go right through here and come out the front, okay? So
The worst case scenario, thankfully we've never had any incident like that. That's because we take the time and the money to invest on the proper equipment, okay? One thing that is easy to overlook is with pickups. We'll have a few company pickups running around, or even your personal vehicle on the weekend or something. T-posts, it's very easy to stack a lot of T-posts or stack anything in there. Once you get above the rim or the top of your box on that pickup bed, you need to have a headache rack, and you'll see them driving around now. They're getting pretty prevalent on a lot of pickups, actually. Just something that goes above the glass, the rear glass on a pickup, so that if you do have to hit the brakes or there is an accident, whatever you're hauling in the back of that pickup doesn't come through the back window and get the driver. Again, the worst case scenario would probably be a load of T-posts that are up too high and they're over the bed of the pickup. And if you hit the brakes and there's no headache rack there, it's not unreasonable that one of those T-posts can slide out, go right through the back window, hit the driver, hit the passenger, hit anybody in there, okay? It's unreal how fast those things can get moving if you have to get on the brakes abruptly. The glass isn't going to stop them, the fiberglass cab isn't going to stop them, nothing's going to stop them unless you have a headache rack.